In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 439 of our ongoing exploration of the immersive cosmos. This week on the show, we welcome Achinta S. McDaniel, founding artistic director of Blue13 Dance Company, who are bringing their all-new work, Soliloquy, to LA's Heritage Square Museum May 31st through June 2nd. Blue13's Shaadi is one of my personal favorite pieces of the past few years, and I'm looking forward to this new piece, the details of which we'll get into in the interview to follow. It's not all that we'll get into, as this is one of the best conversations I've had in a while, period. And I'm so happy to share it with all of you. Before we get there, one reminder and one big announcement, along with our usual campaign check-in. Let's start with the reminder. This Saturday, May 18th, we are hosting the world premiere of Siobhan O'Loughlin's Broken Bone Bathtub, the documentary chronicling her last pre-pandemic tour of her one-woman show that took place in donated bathrooms across the United States at Thymele Arts in Hollywood. Complete with a Q&A and a mixer afterwards. Tickets are just $25 and no pro backers get a $5 discount. This is our next immersive meetup in LA, and we dropped some more tickets this week after selling out the initial block. I've seen the list of folks coming, and it is going to be a very fun crowd. Speaking of very fun crowds, it's time for me to put on my Immersive Experience Institute co-founder hat, because it's always a very fun crowd at the next stage. And I am so pleased to finally be able to share with you both the location and the dates for the next great gathering of the immersive creative community. Save the dates, January 17th through 19th, 2025. That's when we'll be taking over the Pasadena Playhouse in Pasadena, California, and weaving together the largest gathering of immersive creators, producers, technicians, academics, and aspiring creators yet. If you've been to the previous next stage or attended either of the immersive design summits, you know the kind of electricity that happens in those rooms. This time we've got the biggest room we've ever had a chance to play with, and we'll be balancing that out with our signature salons and connection-focused events that tap into the wisdom of our community while charting the future of immersive and experiential art and entertainment. If you haven't already, sign up for the Institute newsletter to stay up to date on programming, scholarships, and ticket on sale dates. You'll find that link in the show notes. Okay, back now to my No Proscenium hat. Let's adjust that there. Okay, cool. We've reached the Patreon campaign status report section of the program. I had to go all the way back to episode 436 to find the last time we announced some backers, but I'm happy to say we have a number to shout out this time. Lauren Jacobson, Sarah Fenton, MC, Amy Stepanovich, Lisa Gregorian, and Nikki Rakauskas. Thank you all for helping keep this fully independent and audience-supported project going. Right now, we are just 5 backers away from the magical 450 mark, where I'll lay down my shill hat here on the pod for a month if we can reach that goal by the end of May. I believe in us. I believe we can do it and take a break from this mode. You just might be the person who puts us over and keeps me from applying it in and out this summer by heading over to patreon.com/noproscenium. Not only do backers get the newsletter and access to our Discord, but they also get early access and discounts to our events, plus the knowledge that I won't mess up their animal-style fries, the cost of which a month is enough to keep an independent media operation from disappearing into the ether if everyone who relies on it were to chip in. That's right. Animal-style fries are $6, and I'm asking for 5. But you don't get fries for that. So, as always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mystery, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Cameo Wood, Tome Wilson, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Genties, Kurt Collins, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Lecker LaCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. And hey, We're always on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. And with that, let's get into this week's episode. Joining us now is Achinta S. McDaniel, founding artistic director of Blue13 Dance Company, known for her experimentation with international styles and for inventive staging of her signature contemporary Indian forms. A professor at the Glorya Kaufman School of Dance at USC, she's the driving force behind the upcoming Soliloquy, Immersive Experience at Heritage Square, LA, which finds Blue13 returning to the site of the phenomenon, which was Shaadi, one of my favorite pieces of 2021. Achinta, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Noah, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
As I was saying right before I turned the microphones on for recording, I'm sorry I just didn't have you out after Shaadi, because
Oh,
that piece, like I like a few people in the immersive scene in LA are like intimately familiar with like Heritage Square like museum to a
right,
degree that like no human being except those who work there should be. It's fantastic, but at a certain point you're like, I basically work here now.
right.
And the way y'all lit that place up, both literally and figuratively, with that absolutely incredible piece in 2021. After a year where we were basically starved for any live immersive
Sure.
work or live work at all, to
Right.
come through with that piece, I'll always be grateful for that.
Oh, that's
So
so nice. Thank you so much. It was, yeah, that time, right? 2021. And it was still heavy in the pandemic. People were still masked up in all of the structures inside. Like it was a wild time. People were trepidatious, but also so hungry to be together and see something and imbibe art. So it was just, yeah, it was, we were also as artists, right? At that time, just, okay, I got to get out there and I have to do the most.
yeah, and you did the most, and like, and I have very vivid, clear memories of that piece, and it's been like 3 years now, so like, yeah, and I see a lot. So I've been eagerly awaiting to see when y'all got back into it. So before we really get into it,
Thank you.
what is the pitch on Soliloquy? What's
Yeah.
coming up here at the end of May?
Sure. So the end of May, we're doing Soliloquy. It's a site-specific, immersive dance experience by Blue13, my company of over 2 decades. We transform the audiences into these active participants. Obviously, that's what immersive is, but especially in dance, for us, it's really about these solo performances of dancers in strange sites, and it's a real feel of a sort of voyeuristic journey for the audiences to kind of rove in and out of houses, bedrooms, dining rooms, and witness these beautiful solos, and also moments of families coming together at a dining table, of a party in the apothecary, each kind of transforming with each home and house at Heritage Square Museum having such a distinct personality that really sort of dictates kind of what's happening in the behind these closed doors. And I just love working there at Heritage Square. Soliloquy really deepens kind of what we did at Shaadi, which was our first time there, by really leaning into the idea of the audiences being able to witness these things, in a sort of titillating, sexy way from outside the garden, looking in through the window, from really wondering, can I be here? Am I allowed to do this? Am I, we want them to really feel like they're part of the narrative also. So it deepens this year by really allowing our audiences to make choices, to be prompted to do things like select the music for a certain solo, to help shape the narrative, to choose who dances the final solo, to choose who they're going to follow at one part. Some places will manipulate them, right, to push them into areas where we want them to go. But for the most part, we really want the experience of audiences with each other, and to increase sort of the dialogue and discourse that's happening with the Angelinos and anyone who's coming in from out of town with one another. What did you see? Where were you for dinner? What, to really have that conversation and connect these humans, not just with us and the dancers in the piece, but with each other, because they will not all experience the same things, right? And every single night will obviously be different because it's shaped by the people who are there.
That idea of playing with the dynamic of the audience with each other, what did that evolve out of? Why are you chasing that?
Yeah, I think, that's just something I've long been obsessed with as a maker. I really it's about for dance in particular, and this is me on the heels of going to a comedy show last night. I was talking about this with my
Yeah, yeah,
husband.
yeah.
There is such a joy walking into a theater, um, and an experience. Let's talk about even just the comedy show last night. Filled with joy, laughing, talking to each other. Can you imagine, especially in Los Angeles when we're so siloed and we're in our cars all the time, to have an experience where it's okay to laugh and talk to strangers is so important right before the show. And then, of course, as a dance maker, we're there for the singular experience that's ephemeral day after day, night after night. It is so intriguing to me to have audience members who come from all different walks of life and ages to be across the aisles from each other, to have to intake the same breath when something beautiful or shocking happens on stage, to have this experience that drives affinity between people, that makes them uh, might see something that's new that they haven't seen before, and then be able to lean across and chat about it at intermission, or just create a conversation between people who normally would not. I guess at the root of it, I'm being wordy about it. I guess the root of it is to create connection between strangers and people who normally would not, right? Not just
Yeah.
I'm interested, of course, in the connection between I want them to love the work or be intrigued in some or hate the work or whatever it is with what's happening with the dance on stage. Not hate, but yeah, but to be intrigued by the choreography and interested in that way, yeah. But the other piece of it for me is really about um, with the enlivening of conversations and I think lasting connections with each other, with people in the aisle or friends or loved ones or whoever is there. But really, how can I connect people, humans, with each other based on this experience?
I love that you're focused on that. You're thinking about that because
Yeah.
like that for me is like the whole point. I love that like you grok it that it's like it's the whole point of all the arts, right?
Right.
You know, like it's like this is the glue that holds us together. This is the medium in which we
Mm.
exist, right? Like a
Yes.
scientific medium sense, right? Like
Yeah.
you know, and that's also what I love. Like the words culture or medium like have these scientific connotations of like, oh, that's what you grow in. You grow something in a culture,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And when we grow we connect and we create bigger structures and so and stronger bonds
Mm.
and that's something that i I get excited about in this immersive and experiential form is that it's almost like targeted directly at that right from the start. It's
Yes.
like, the acknowledgement that if we're not doing that in the creation, then the piece doesn't work at all.
Right.
Right. Like it's
Right.
not just like it's never the look at me. I mean, you want the look at me. You want to have these incredible charismatic performers. You want people to
Yes.
get completely wrapped up in a moment of like, did you see when she did that? Right.
Yes.
You want that, but then it's like all of the ripples beyond it. Everything, like what does that moment do to like all the other performers, all the other characters, all of the audience, and how does that flow back into the next singular moment?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
The ripple
Yeah.
effect, that butterfly effect.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, we're on one. We're on one. So I feel like this kind of let me rephrase because I was going to ask you about like
Sure.
why work in site specific manner at all, but I think
Oh,
we're in that at the moment.
yeah.
I'm curious because you have a really broad experience. Like if memory serves, you've choreographed for film, you've obviously choreographed, for like stage,
Yeah.
etc., and
Mhm.
performed in many different contexts. What does working this way in a non-traditional non-proscenium stage,
Yeah.
not a non-stage environment, not for the camera but for audience being maybe wherever, how does that compare for you to working in those other forms, like
Mm.
what carries through and what is a unique challenge of trying to work this way?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. There's something I think because of just my predilection with wanting to connect people and have them talk to each other. Maybe that's a control freak nature of mine, but I think because of that, the immersive space really calls to me, and there's so much more freedom to do that there, with especially with this idea of giving, either manipulating, like I was saying before, or giving choices and some agency to the participants, right? Like that is intriguing to me. I and then an audience member that is watching what everyone's doing, because I'm so intrigued in this human behavior element of it and how they're roving through the space. So that really calls to me. And we don't have that in a proscenium, right? Like we have it. I was talking about pre-show intermission. That's kind of the only time that's happening, at the bar and in line for the restroom, right? That's where those conversations happen, which are great. But in this way, this is happening throughout. You're bumping into somebody, or a performer pushed you back, or you're suddenly sitting next to another performer, or you're thrust into another room with a bunch of strangers that you don't know. These are the things that are so exciting, that you cannot do unless you're in this immersive kind of world. So I really enjoy that. I think also just my work with Disney over the past several years with the company. I mean, they do it really well, obviously, the immersive world. So just there's something so joyful about escaping reality for a couple of hours in this Brigadoon kind of atmosphere, right? That's especially in Heritage Square, it really elicits this idea of, am I going to go through those gates and disappear? Like, is this a world? And look, I love that feeling. It's a little dangerous, and it's a little bit like putting a mask on it, or going to a masquerade ball for people, I think, because there's a great freedom. We used to do all of these things, back in undergrad, of like putting on a mask and improvising, and what it would just create these so much freedom and so much emotion that you didn't know you had, in connecting with other humans. So I think that's something that it does in the immersive world with dance. So in some ways, to answer your question, yes, of course, from a choreographic approach, I'm really interested in creating score-based choreography, not to get all granular about it.
No,
so that's
get granular, nerd out.
Yeah. So, and that means really working together closely with the dancers, and very collaboratively with all the dancers that are in the piece, all the performers that are in the piece, giving a score, playing with it together, making these solos happen. That's been the process for many months. So playing with that, and then just kind of tweaking and changing and tweaking and changing, and then thinking about, I'm not making the work in a site sensitive way. We're deliberately making it in these spaces. So it's not like I'm making the piece somewhere else and then just, okay, we'll fit it into this ballroom in the Perry House at Heritage Square. It's really about, what did she do with the space today? What did the executive director do with the space at Heritage House today? What furniture's in the room? What weird mannequins are there? What can we strike? What can we move around? And then how do we build the piece for this space specifically? And that happens I think it's the 8 different structures that make up Heritage Square. So it's like 8 stages, but then within those, there's a dining room, there's a staircase, there's a parlor, there's a bedroom. So it's multiple different stages in that way. And you're constantly thinking about in the round, and always when we're in this making period of developing the piece, we're thinking, well, what if somebody from the audience sits down on the bed? What if they're on the floor? What if you force them to sit on the floor? So constantly really, and you taught me that a little bit, Noah, from last time after Shaadi, after I read what you wrote, really about thinking even more deeply about what our participants are doing. Like, how are they experiencing it in a way that's not fourth wall, I just happen to be in a room with you, but throughout tending to their experience overall as we're kind of roving through the piece. I mean, that's sort of a long and windy answer to what you were saying. But
see, this is how you know you haven't listened to the show, because that was a totally normal answer for this show. You clapped to the fact that you hadn't listened to the show before. That's not.
I told you, I'm sorry.
But it's like, that was that's so normal for us, right? If it wasn't you going long, it'd be me. So the listeners are like, yeah, he's being quiet today. He must be impressed.
You can't do it. You can't do it on the stage. I mean, the stage is beautiful, but you can't do that. Any of that here. It's so much more. It's just so thrilling, because I want to make all of the people dance. And I think that's where the sort of teacher community builder part of me, culture bearer part of me comes in too. I want them, whether they're going to move or dance or sit or stand, I want them to somehow really be engaged in it. And whether that means it's not a dance class with me in the studio, right? But in this case, it's still this idea of sort of mad scientisting.
Yeah.
What we're doing.
I love that. You're zeroing on that because when I fell in love with this form, it was the experience of, oh, I feel like I was just in like a scene study class, but I
Mhm.
didn't have to learn any lines. And then I just wanted to share that feeling with normies of
Yeah.
like, hey, you don't have to take 6 years of acting class and you don't have to take a bunch of improv classes. You could just show up, be here, and the performers are going to do so well that you'll just get wrapped up in it,
Mm,
respond authentically, and they will run with it.
there it
And
is.
and why can't the whole world just have that all the time? Everybody getting to go, not live in it constantly. That's not healthy. But like in the same way that a religious practice is about like, oh, weekly check-ins, right? For a community, the
Yeah.
same thing, right? Like a regular check-in of like, hey,
Mm,
we're gonna go experience this. We're gonna be lit up that way. You
yes.
called it like in this Brigadoon manner. Hey, we're gonna step out of the normal
Right.
for 2 hours. We're gonna remind ourselves of how connected we could
Mm,
be in a very
absolutely.
disconnected world. Um,
Yes. That's perfect. Can I say something about that too?
please.
The underlying thing, even though we're escaping reality and the day-to-day drudgery and we're in this realm together, we're connecting, there's this we know what we've all experienced, right? These past several years
Mhm.
and the pandemic and all this. We also know that these past many years, how damaging and crazy and fraught all of the social media flattened screens world has been. And then how much that was reified and deepened during the pandemic. So the piece underlying thing of speaking of connection to the rest of our real lives, I think the piece is really about partially interrogating that, right? Like that flattened connection was the only thing we had for a year or two or more for some people. That's all. I mean, teaching dances class online, having screen dances, just all of that. Anyway, that was everything was on Zoom, right? Like, so it got lonelier in so many ways and harmful and painful. And then I think the piece, with soliloquy, it sort of is like this idea of loneliness and solo, right? And how is this curated self,
Oh,
right? That curated self, just constantly negotiating, right, with
oh my God.
reality. How
Yeah.
does that how does that isolating behind a screen really make the loneliness worse, deepen, but it's simulating connection. So it's sort of this comment on technology and even AI and progress and how
Yeah.
that's at complete odds with and constantly grappling with, right? With loneliness.
Oh, I like almost like rip the arms off my chair. Like this is so dead on like the background radiation of the moment. One of my students in their closing presentation a couple of weeks ago, they were trying to say pandemic and they said during Zoom instead
Oh,
of during pandemic. Like
oh,
they were saying during Zoom. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm stealing that." Right? Because it was Zoom. Like what happened that year? We were
that's it.
Zoomed, right?
Oh,
And then the other one just today while we're recording this, because you said flattened,
yeah.
there is this ad that Apple released, an ad for their new iPad Pro,
Yeah.
which features like this giant industrial press and like all of these like musical instruments and arcade machines and toys and just everything and paints being crushed by this
Oh my
industrial press, and then air goes and then reveals here's the iPad Pro, and like
God. Oh,
everybody is pillaring this thing, like, and I was watching, I was like, no,
oh
no, I was just saying out
no.
loud, and everyone's like screaming at it, like, how did they make this ad? But it's also this perfect metaphor
Yeah.
for like what's happened to our entire culture, where you have this rich, beautiful, embodied, like, here's a squeezy toy, and here's spray paint cans, and here's a full piano, here's a guitar, and they destroyed them and turned it into a flat, featureless piece of glass.
This is horrible.
And
And
it's like, this is what we've done to ourselves. This is
Yeah.
what we've allowed.
Mhm.
I own an iPad, and I was like, I hate the fact I now own an iPad
Yeah.
because of this ad. Like this brilliant. I hope whoever directed it was intending to like do this exact. I'm gonna sneak this in. This is gonna be abhorrent. Um,
Yes. Oh my god.
and yeah, like diametrically opposed to like how we actually live, right?
Sure.
Because plenty of people want to escape these bodies, but like that's because of how alienated we've become from ourselves.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
And you're right, and then the experience of dance and all art in person, I think there's, like, a real anxiety and fear around that
mm,
still, um, and maybe that for some people will never go away, which is
yeah,
the sort of sad that's, like, the melancholy kind of behind it, um, and then I read and then AI. Then
yeah,
I just read something like a clickbait, so don't quote me on this. I'm not sure how real this is, but FK Twigs, the artist, just was talking about something to the effect of using deep fake AI to be her social media self so that she can focus on her art and all the reality of life. And that killed me,
oh
Noah,
yeah,
because I said, "Oh, that's what it's gonna continue to turn into." And then two things: what is the point if we know
mhm,
it's all going to be fake, but we're still society of the spectacle? Like we're just like we know it's fake, but we want to be part of the fakeness. We like it. We
yeah,
feel safe, and we're accepting this really insane idea that I can have a whole different Achinta that's gonna live online and anywhere flattened and on screens, and then I'm gonna be my real self. So I'm gonna have this, like, wonderful sort of split personality self, one that's like this Sims character and this other one that's the real,
yeah.
but then begging the question of, like, what is reality? What are we imbibing against reality?
And at what cost, right? Like, don't quote me on some of these, but like, well, some things you can, right? Even like, the Sam Altman, the guy who heads up the Chat GPT like
Yeah.
branch of this stuff is saying, oh, this just takes too much energy to be cost effective.
Mm,
And then, most people go like, oh, well, I guess that just means it goes away. It's like, no, they're going to keep on pushing. I was like, okay, well, I guess they'll
right,
pay for it. It's like, no, we'll pay for it. And we'll pay for it two ways. One, everything
sure,
we use that has had AI shoved into it will start costing us more. Even
right,
Zencaster, which we're recording on, they'll
right,
start charging us more. I'm not using any of the AI features. They'll charge me for it.
right,
But then also, we have energy markets. Running our refrigerator is going to cost more
right.
because someone is currently typing in a prompt that is like, Taylor Swift fighting Kendrick Lamar at Drake's house, right? Like full video,
Yeah,
1984 filters, go. And
right.
then, a small lake is drained to cool the computers to make that guy's
Oh,
video. If I
oof.
see that video online because one of you made it, I will hunt you down. So, uh, but that's the and to what end? So that one person can be amused,
Right.
right? And
But also
that's
yeah,
killing me.
sorry.
No,
Also
geez, you.
the obligation behind it. Like, it'd be one thing if FK Twigs said that, and that's true, but also the feeling that you as a celebrity or any not even a celebrity, anybody are obligated to have this sort of online avatar presence, and you have to
Yeah,
do it. There's no escape. Like, that's it. That's it. There's no question. There's no putting it down. This is the way it has to go. There's some sort
yeah.
of really terrifying inevitability about that.
Like the thing that bugs me about it is like I'm more and more coming out of the closet as being someone who doesn't like generative AI, and I've got some
Mhm.
folks, even some core backers, who are like they're deep invested into
Mm,
like making that work, and I do think there are some use cases where it could be interesting,
of
right? Where
course,
it's like, hey, it's a support tool,
of course.
like someone's one man banding it for their friends, like doing like a role playing game thing. Great,
Sure.
wonderful, right? Like there's some interesting cases here if we can get the energy costs right.
Right.
But like it is way more interesting to me, this algorithmic stuff, if it's like letting us manage, our lives as consumers of all this stuff. Like
Mm,
I don't need AI generating more FK Twigs. I don't need it. I don't need it to make me 50,000 Tuvalu songs, right? I just
Right.
want a new Tuvalu song, right? Like,
Yeah.
or you get like some new album from someone and you're like, oh, did they use AI to write this?
Right.
Like,
Right.
like this is so, I mean, there's some things where you're like, this is so similar to your last work. Are you just pumping
Mhm.
something out of the back end of a Pinto? Like we don't need that. We need tools to manage like, hey, where should I put my attention? Because
Mhm.
our attention is so fractured,
Right.
and we only have so much of it. And there's so there are such better experiences to be had
Yeah.
that have depth to them,
Mhm.
that have dimension to them, and
Mhm.
aren't just, hey, I'm going to shove you, something new and something flat right at you.
Yeah, and I think that even this is great. Thank you, Noah. By the way, I love talking about this with you. I just think then even having, I think that more experiences, like I think it will go to, or I made this as an optimist in me, which is she's a small part of me, but is going into these experiences or building these beautiful poetry of our time kind of experiences where we have to be together. I think my feeling is that more of us will want to get rid of um, phones and technology coming into those spaces so that it becomes even more precious and singular and experiential, and it has to be a
Yeah.
memory. Even just talking, I mean, talking with my parents about my little ones, right? I have a baby and a 6-year-old, and I'm like, oh my god, she crawled, and it was so funny how she was yelling at her brother, and they're like, did you film it? Why didn't you film it? And I'm like, well, I just wanted, it was just it's just such a great memory. And I
Yes.
just memory, and even for my parents who are in their 70s, it was like, oh, they were kind of disappointed in me,
Yeah.
but also like, "Oh, yeah, we have those. We have plenty of those memories," you know?
Yeah.
So I just feel like that building of that, like, even, going to see, The Misfits, and Glenn Danzig was joining them, and this was back in 2017. He was joining them at the Forum, and he made all of us put our cell phones in these locked bags and check in to go into the space. It was freeing, and that's people have done that a lot, and I'm like, "Well, I think more of that, right,
Yeah.
will create, like, just," I think, in the face of building more and more AI and all this stuff, I feel like people hopefully will do more of that. It's the whole idea of, like, hipsters, like, being more analog right now. We have, as I show you the record player behind me, but but, like, do you churn your own butter or no?
Do you grind your own coffee by hand? That might be
Right.
nice to do, right? And there's this paradox to it. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is like we've been shoved down these social media holes and made it so that the only way to find an audience, the only way to connect with other people
Right,
is to use these tools.
right.
And then now in the age of the TikTok algorithm, like all of those pipes are being closed, and it's just like, no, only a select few will be anointed, and everyone's page views go down, everyone's follower
Yeah,
count. If you're on Instagram or whatnot, like
yeah,
half of people's reels are just like, oh, why is my engagement down? Why is no one seeing
yeah,
these things? More people used to be seeing these things. And it feels like it's this trap we've been like lured into where you start going like, maybe I should just start printing some zines or some shit, like
totally.
posting things on walls and not using
Yeah,
QR codes, but just like, like getting, because you
yeah.
use a QR code, you can give someone a virus, but like, getting analog again and just trying. I mean,
Mhm.
or just populating space. It was funny. It was like, I was walking up Hillhurst in Los Feliz, and like, once in a while, people will go and like they'll spray paint, like an album release
Yeah,
thing. And one of the ones that I noticed yesterday, which is clearly from a couple of months ago, was "We Don't Trust You," which was like the beginning of the album that started like the Drake Kendrick
oh, right,
war like a couple months ago. And I was just like walking along Hillhurst, I'm like, oh, that's here. That's weird. I didn't notice that one before, but I wasn't tuned in to look at it. And
right.
you know, suddenly the space around you is enchanted. Suddenly, the
Mhm.
thing that is familiar has been put into a new light, alienated a little bit, and
Mm,
then mythologized. On
yeah,
that note, you've worked at Heritage Square before. why the return? Why come back and play again as opposed to moving on to somewhere else?
Oh, that's a great question. Heritage Square, well, I love it. And it's one of those sites in LA that I feel like every Angelino I have a conversation with is like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to go there. And I've
What
never
is that thing over there? I've driven by it.
What is that?
Yeah.
I see those. Is that a Victorian house? Is that a church? Like everyone, it's
How do
always
you
that
get
same.
there? Yeah.
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 So it's very few people that I've met that have actually been there, but everyone who wants to go. So that's part of it. I just love the idea of this place being in a very modest neighborhood off the 110, being such a magical, as you said, enchanting place to make work. And it really spoke to. I moved to this neighborhood. I'm not far from there at all, and I moved to this neighborhood a good over a decade ago. And I right away was like, what is that? What is that? And then I never went until it was like
Mm.
2020 when we were all walking and driving and doing all this stuff by ourselves and with our families. And I just stood in front of the gates and I was like, oh, and this is like 10 years later. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is where it has to be. Right. It just hit me so hard that again, that Brigadoon thing was there. I was like, this is a magical, very strange space. And I love strange. I also am Indian and love to dance on the graves of Victorianism. So that's a big part of me, even going and populating that space at all with my work is about being like, hi there. Yes, thank you, ancestors, right? This is my ancestors as me doing a big, can I swear?
Oh yeah, you can fucking
Oh,
swear.
doing a big fuck you to the Brits.
Nice.
So yeah, I love the space. And then it's evolved and it constantly changes and evolves is something I love about Heritage Square. That they're always moving things and restoring different parts of it. It just speaks, it's like a really interesting history. It's right off one of the oldest freeways or the oldest freeway, I think, in the United States or something. I don't know. There's something really
Yeah.
interesting to me about the way in which it was built and moved and, you know, um, from a sort of decolonizing mindset, I really like to have my really beautiful, diverse, awesome queer cast in there, making these spaces our own and taking up space, quite frankly. And the other part of the return is another thing that I'm deeply interested in as an Indian American artist, South Asian American artist, is not being constantly siloed into one space of expectation by people, which is like, oh, she's Indian, it's gonna be Bollywood. It's gonna be that. It always has to be this or it's this. I'm just a contemporary dance maker. And I happen to be first generation born in this country. So my work is gonna reflect that. Whether it's a giant, joyful Bollywood piece that is the finale of Shaadi, which means wedding in Hindi, right? Or it's these really intense, very weird, I'm just warning you, very weird solos that I've kind of collaborated and created on a score-based structure with these dancers in like the living room or in a kitchen of one of the horde houses, right? So just also showing that the speaking of tightrope walking and split personality, that's who I am as an artist and dance maker and who I have to be just being in predominantly white spaces kind of my whole life growing up and the training being ballet and tap and jazz and modern and also growing up culturally doing Bhangra and Bollywood, also having classical Indian dance in my background and my lineage,
Yeah.
always sort of being pushed or pulled, not Indian enough, not American enough, too close to this, like that's always been the conversation, period. And never goes away. It's constant education of peers, colleagues, higher ups, gatekeepers, audiences, friends, students. It's like that real teaching of, oh, well, we are first generation here and there will be now more and more of us, but being first is a lot. And it means that you have to have your identity is about walking on a tightrope your whole life. That's where you sort of find comfort in being in not being one thing, right? So it's that's why going back from Shaadi, which was such an Indian wedding, it was actually an American wedding, is more like what I like to call it, because I'm no less American than someone who has a different skin color. But really inviting people, that's an audience, that's a neighborhood coming to life and planning a wedding. And then we shock the audiences with who ends up together, or we shock our ancestors with who ends up together, and then who's having a tryst growing up in the neighborhood together. That's what that was about. But a lot of really leaning into the radical joy of Indianness and Americanness at once. That was that piece. I wanted to return to really come back down to just who I am as a maker. Of course, flourishes and touches will come from all of my different varying backgrounds, and the multiplicity is there. But this one's really about, it's just created really about who's coming and how they're going to experience it, without a real thinking about me and my ego and the expectation of what Achinta is going to make for it. I want it to really be about how they're going to take advantage, the people who are attending who are going to take advantage and go see and experience the things that they want to see, and how's that going to speak to them, and how are they going to talk about it with each other. So
Whether you said you said it as a warning about being score based, and I'm like, oh, that's not a warning to me. That's a promise. Like, that's just very. I I love watching creators like explore full ranges of their identities as and then particularly when that's in relation to their company of performers and then their community beyond that, right? Like there's a level of deep vulnerability and massive courage to like lay out so much of oneself, and I just knocked it. Sorry everybody, I knocked the
that's okay.
mic with my glasses as I always do. um and 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 I'm, as you're talking and knowing that space, I'm starting to get like little flashes of what tonally might be happening, and that's exciting to me because of how kind of haunted Heritage Square already feels by
Yeah.
like the layers of history of each of the buildings, the years that I've come to see,
Mm.
you know, goofy game things and then haunt things and then trick or treat and then shoddy and everything. Like
Yes.
there's this stacking of possibilities
Mm.
in that location, and this just feels like a totally different flavor in the
Mm.
space based on what everything you've talked about flattening of culture and exploring contemporary styles. Like, wow, yeah,
Ugh.
I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited.
Oh, me too. Thanks. Yeah,
Yes.
I think the other part of that is like, you're so right. It is so layered there, and then just think of labor and history in all those places is like
Mhm.
really in each different house or structure being so wildly different. And there's one in particular that I call the apothecary
Yeah.
that is different than the rest of them. And we didn't play in that space in Shaadi. So I was really excited to take that space and take up space. And now we're in all of the structures this year, I think, except for the barn. That's the only one that's being restored that we're not in. But each of them have such a distinct personality. And then this is just me riffing right now, hearing you say that. I think all the multiplicity and the multifaceted layers of identity for me and the dancers show up in all of these sort of 8 different structures in really interesting ways. So there might be a moment in the apothecary that's like me going wild, thinking about femininity and agency over sexuality and brownness and um, but it comes out in a really pop way, like a very much more like jazzy way. And then in the Ford House, which is, they all have names, right, at Heritage Square, so then there's the Ford House, which is really about this couple, right, really in constant strife, and he's having an affair possibly, and it's this real sort of fight that takes place in their house back and forth. And that's very much more to like a Charles Mingus jazz piece. They're all very different musically, and then in some of the places the audience is literally being given a device to choose the music for a specific solo. So all of the dancers have created playlists that we've worked with them on that are the possibilities for the
Oh,
audience to choose from. And so even though they're basically scored and structured, they change every time depending on who's in the room.
Oh,
And those might be some Western classical piece. It can be Bach in one place. And when we're in the chapel, it's a party. There's drinks. There's some Bollywood song from the 60s playing. Like it's all over the place.
did you sneak
But
any misfits in? So.
I know I didn't just Misfits. Now that we talked about Misfits, I might put it in the pre-show. Yeah, so it's great. And they all are it's just wacky. And also the other thing that I love is the idea of being invited into people's houses,
Yeah.
and what it feels like, like just even growing up, we had so many of those dinner parties, right? And visited so many of the dinner parties in the Indian community in Ohio. And we would just go and decked out beautiful. My mom in her gorgeous sari and my dad in his turban and his debonair suit and, always dressed up every Friday and Saturday, going to parties or having parties at our house. And that idea I love as an artist. I play with it in a lot of work, but it really is extra heightened, I think, here at Heritage Square, of inviting people to dinner party and then hiding all of the things that you don't want them to see. Don't go in the bathroom, sweep everything in the closet, but beyond the closet, like actually figuratively what's in the closet, right? So really how like sometimes the reality of the family dynamic might seep out accidentally, and then we try to hide. I think we're playing with that a lot.
I got to get you to stop hyping this up to me. I'm too excited. Now I'm
Yeah.
like, ah!
Now I don't want to disappoint.
No, but the flip side is I'm sitting there like, how many times do we need to see this? So that's what's
3.
going on in my brain. Yeah. Good. 3. That's a decent number. There's somewhere they're like, well, you got to see it 8 times to get everything. I was like, my
I
God.
know.
Three is fine. 3 is fine. Before I let you go, and it's just about 1:00 here, and I do have to, I have to get rolling. I'm sure you've got plenty you got to get rolling on. I just want to ask real quick. You're at the Kaufman School at USC.
Yes.
Julia Ritter's dean over there right now. Literally wrote the book on site-specific immersive dance performance, tandem dances. Shout out. And I'm wondering how slightly it's a rigged question in some way because like we got to be on a little panel. This is where this all started. How curious are the students there, or the student level dancers that you're
Mm,
working with beyond there about site specific work, about immersive? What are you seeing? Are they gung ho about it? Are they just curious? Are they like, what is it that those people are doing? I don't
mm,
understand it. Like, how is it fitting into their kind of conception of what the possibilities for a dancer and a choreographer are
mm.
in 2024?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Our students are wildly intelligent, they're scholars and artists, and they converge those kind of two identities in the dance making that they do. All of our makers are really curious about sort of, or not all, but a lot of our makers are really curious about ways to change and titillate and re-envision ideas of what performance is and what spaces have to look like. And I think the program really does a good job of that. I think Sabella Grimes, who's one of my colleagues and one of the original faculty members there who helped build the school, has always interrogated that in his work and then really teaches that. They really get a lot from him in particular about that. And of course, the dean writing the literal book about immersive dances is great. She's been there for a short time. So the students she's already seen, they're doing work. One of our seniors who's about to graduate, Valerie Chen, just did an AAPI centered night market at her house that she shares with several of the other seniors down right there near USC. And it was incredible. And there was food and there were vendors and there was photography and there was a series of different works in different spaces around on the porch, on the lawn, on the driveway. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. And she was actually in Shaadi a few years ago. So we're super proud of her. And they are doing more and more of that. And we've seen it happen over the past several years. I'm really on their own, even outside of projects that they're doing for Kaufman or any of that. They are out there in the community making pieces, making works, making dance films, doing immersive pieces on their own, really playing and developing work that way. Their improvisation skills are incredible. So, I mean, and they're just such stunning, beautiful people and humans and dancers. And I think the faculty who are all incredible. I shouted out Samantha, but I think the whole faculty and Julia really support that. So it's been great to see. And I think as they grow in the program, I think more in like the 3rd and 4th year, they get really more and more adventurous as the time allots, and seeing kind of which areas they want to lean into. So that's really wonderful to see, and wonderful to be able to mentor them in that way. So we have actually about seven dancers who are rising third years that are actually in Soliloquy this year.
Very cool. And
Yeah.
Soliloquy is coming up on May 31st, June 1st, and June 2nd there at Heritage Square Museum, right off the 110. If you haven't been, you've driven by it. If you're in Los Angeles at some point, while you're afraid for your life because you were on the 110 and you knew sooner or later it was going to catch up with you. Um, I'm cracking up because it's true. Thank you so much for this. This was an absolute joy and delight.
Me
And
too. Thank you.
it's always great when the maker of something that I really like turns out to be a wonderful person to talk to.
Oh,
So
thanks,
double
Noah.
joy.
Thank
Really
you.
looking forward to it at the end of the month. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Noah.
Once again, I want to thank Achinta for being our guest on the show this week. I am excited about Soliloquy because I really did love the last piece. I'm not just saying that. I don't just say. I say things for a living, but like, I'm not just saying that. Like, it's sitting there at the end of my month. This little sparkly object that I'm going to go and absorb myself into. It's been good slash fun of late here on the professional side of my life. We won't worry about all the other stuff that's going on. None of that's fun or good. There's good things some days. But got a chance this week to go out to a high school in the Valley. I'm being slightly cagey. Not that it isn't public knowledge, but like I feel a little odd talking about like oh, bunch of teenagers did an immersive theater thing. So Chris Woolman, who writes for NoPro, and who's one of the backers of the podcast, right? You hear his name every week. Chris got the E3W Productions folks to let him stage, and they helped out stage a production of In Another Room, like a mashup of a couple of the episodes with the senior class at the high school where he teaches theater at. And I went out this week, and gosh darn it, it was good. It was really good, right? Like, it's been a while since I've been to see any high school theater. Like, it's been, I think, since college, since the last time no, that's not true. I went to see some high school theater like 8 years ago because someone down in Orange County was doing a piece. Um, I was suitably impressed by the performers and their ability to tackle the material. And also impressed by the high school's willingness to let them tackle the material, because there's some dark stuff in Another Room if you've been to those shows. But I was also like impressed by like how when you like mash up the pieces, how it worked. It worked real well. They also did the piece they did in New Orleans this year for Overlook, which is a piece I hadn't seen yet. So I got new In Another Room this week, which was exciting. And then when I got out of there, there was like a bunch of folks, who work with E3. There was E3W and a bunch of folks who work with E3W, all of whom we know, who are there waiting to go into the next one. And it was exciting to see them. And it was like this little mini little reunion. We'll see a good number of those people on Saturday for Siobhan's documentary, and looking forward to that. It's really, really good group of people who are coming through for that. So if you don't have anything to do this Saturday and you're in LA, that is going to be fun. So follow your fun nose to go do that. Of course, there's a good chance you'll be listening afterwards and be like, oh no, I didn't pay attention for the past 4 weeks when you were telling me. I was like, yeah, I know. You skipped over parts. And then, we got to get the dates and the location for the next stage out there. And if you notice, yeah, it's at the Playhouse. And where were we trying to be before the world fell apart? That's right, the Playhouse. So trying to close some loops here. after a long time, and in a world that looks very different from the one that we were originally planning and trying to get the Playhouse event off. So this will not be a rehash of the program like we tried in 2022, and then the next variant destroyed our ability to do it. This will be a different program, and it's got some unique design situations that we're currently like scheming about, how to balance things. I'm really excited. Uh, some people are like, "Oh, great! Now I can tell them, here's a talk I want to give." We are not opening an RFP yet. We may not open an RFP. We have a lot of talks from previous RFPs, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff we haven't gotten to because the 2020 and 22 had like 5 tracks going on, and last time we did 3 tracks. So it's a different beast. And we need to take a moment and figure out what it is we want to curate up before possibly throwing an RFP. So do not just start sending unsolicited talks. Here's the thing with me. This is my personality. If someone says me something unsolicited or someone asks for something, I will often just put it at the bottom of the stack because there's so much going on that I'm trying to get to and solve. So if we're not calling for submissions, keep your powder dry. Because there's a very good chance I'll be like, "Oh, well, we weren't asking, so it goes over here," and we won't crack it back open. And then we do call for submissions. Someone goes, "Oh, I turned in." It's like, nope, there's a process. So just hew to the process is what I'm saying. It's the only way we're going to stay sane. So there's that. Yeah, I don't know. There's Fringe coming up. A lot of stuff from Orlando Fringe in the newsletter this weekend because that's running right now. And then just there's things. The Kia Dreams review went out. I don't know. Now I feel like I'm petering out and vamping, and also I haven't had coffee yet this morning, so that's one of the reasons why I'm just like I can't remember anything. I can't remember anything because I haven't had coffee. So you know what? I'm gonna go have coffee. That sounds like a good idea. Let's do the closing credits, shall we? The associate producer. Did I say that weird? Let me try that again. The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. And everything of the last few minutes and most of the problems you've heard today are my fault. I'm Noah Nelson, and until next time, I'll see you at the show.